As I mentioned, some of you may have already heard me say this, but the Pacific Bonsai Expo was this past weekend in Oakland. If you were there, you had a great time, I would imagine. Some beautiful trees, lots of material, lots of items to buy. If you weren't there, you missed a wonderful weekend. There are lots of pictures on Facebook. Bikowen has YouTube videos that show off the trees, talk to some of the artists. Bjorn posted a video of a nice summary of the event, and I highly would encourage you to check that out. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Dodie Newman. I want to introduce Jason Chan. As owner of Eastern Leaf Bonsai Nursery, founded in 2004, Jason's experience spans over 20 years. His favorite species of tree is junipers. Due to this, he has propagated many of the most common and desirable species of junipers for bonsai. Along with his experience as a bonsai artist, his experience includes handling the difficulties and challenges of fertilizing, propagating, and maintaining the overall health of thousands of trees at his nursery. Jason stays active in the bonsai community. In 2014, he was elected to the board of GSBF. From 2015 to 2017, he held the position of editor of the GSBF Quarterly Bonsai Magazine. Locally has served as an officer for many Southern California bonsai clubs. In 2021, Jason published Bonsai Pocket Guide, A Beginner's Journey, a book dedicated to helping beginners and new enthusiasts start their journey into the art of bonsai. This book, along with his YouTube channel, are sources of good information for those new to the hobby. Jason also hosts an ongoing regular bonsai study group, a place for enthusiasts of all levels to come together and collaborate on bonsai techniques in a welcoming environment. For more information, check out his website, easternleaf.com. Tonight, Jason's going to be discussing the growing, planning, repairing, and developing raw material for bonsai. Please write your questions in the chat. And without further ado, please welcome Jason Chan.
Thank you, Dodie. Just want to confirm that you can hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay, great. Okay, so I welcome everybody to just interrupt me with questions as we go along. I know that if you guys ever watch my videos, it's usually a one-way dialogue. So hopefully with this, you guys can just interrupt me and then I can answer questions as you have them. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about my raw material, how I develop it over time so that it's ready to do a demo. A lot of times you guys will see me do demos on a tree like this. So here I have a juniper. I'll try to scoot it up really close. You guys see that okay? And so this is a juniper, this is a prostrata juniper. And this is typically something I would bring to a demo. It's got a ton, it's really got a big caliper. It's really thick right here. Right there, you can see it's pretty thick. And it's got a lot of foliage everywhere. And this is ideal raw material for doing a demo just because of all these branches. And there's tons of branches everywhere. If I rotate it over here, you can see there's a ton on the top. And you can see a lot on this side everywhere. So this is typically stuff that you wouldn't find as raw material if you were just gonna go nursery hunting. I think I've been working on this tree for maybe about 7 years already. And it's not 7 years where I'm constantly working on it every season, but sometimes it's just a cut here and there. And I'm going to explain to you guys what I do every season. But it's a cut here and there every year. And then over time, it develops into raw material that you can use to do a first styling. During this process, I'm always looking at, so while this tree is in the can, it's in our irrigation system and it's getting thicker and older as it goes. And I'm basically making cuts into the tree every spring and every fall if I get to it. If I don't get to it twice in a year, I'll at least get to it right before spring. So after 7 years, you end up with material like this. That's, if I put this in front of a demo and I get on stage and I have wire, I can make this into a really nice tree. It's got enough branches to do an apex if I want to do something up here. It's got enough branches to basically create a whole entire first styling. And it looks like you have kind of an instant bonsai, but that's not entirely true because it's about 7 years of developing the material, cuts as you go, and then kind of planning out the future design of the tree as it kind of grows every year. So I have Michael Roberts. Michael Roberts is next to me. Come into the frame. So there, he's in the frame. Then it doesn't look like I'm talking to nobody. So Michael Roberts is here. He asked me how old is this tree?
Yeah. Well, how old was it when you started?
When I started, it was probably already about 5 years, 3 to 5 years. You know,
1 gallon nursery
it was
stuff?
1 gallon. I'd say it'd be something like, okay, I have about 5 trees. 1, 2, 3. I have 4 trees with me. So it's probably something like this. There's like this. So this is still pretty decent caliper right there. So what I can do is I'll explain on this one first because this is a lot easier to see. So it was about 5 years, and then you up pot it. You know, I own a nursery, so you up pot it, you fertilize it every year. You know, we fertilize from spring all the way through fall. We don't do as much in the winter, but we're fertilizing regularly every month, and we're getting a lot of water. And the prostrata juniper, this particular species of juniper, really likes a lot of water. So if you give it a lot, it grows thicker really quick. Okay, so I've got this 1 gallon prostrata. You see it's pretty decent caliper there. And you can see that there's some dead branches on it. There's one here, and there's one here. And this is kind of a small version of what I do on the big trees. Let me see if I can pop this out of the can. Okay, thanks. All right, so move that in front. So you can see there's a branch right here, right there. And there's one right here. So as I'm going through looking at material, so say this was sitting in the nursery. Now, all this growth right here was not there before, all this stuff right here. Even these little ones right here, it basically had a branch coming out this way. This is the remnants of it right there, like this. And it had one coming out like this. So as you're doing a design, or as you're thinking about the design and you're developing your material, you got to think of what is kind of the future, I guess, arrangement you want to do on the tree. So for this one, I knew that this branch right here, I'll take a look at this view, was not going to be necessary because you can see it comes out like this. So what I do is I'll kill it. And by killing it, I'm basically cutting it back and letting it die, because basically the tree's pushing up here. It loves to push at the apex, likes to push all over. If you kind of cut a lower branch and neglect it, it'll eventually just die on its own. And what's cool about doing that, and this is kind of through the experience of about 20 years of my nursery, is that branch will die just like this, and then the live vein will start to die. See how it starts to, you can see it dying right there. And that's kind of that natural shari that you get. So you can force it, yeah, you can carve it, but you can also create it on your own by just killing off that branch, and then the live vein will start to reveal itself. Now, where this gets really interesting is I have kind of a juniper back there that has a lot more twisted trunk. And when you kill a branch there, then the live vein starts to die off in a kind of interesting fashion with a little bit of twist. But essentially, this was a branch that I knew was not going to be essential to the design, because let's assume this is the front, like this. If I have a branch that's shooting off this way, I already know that's going to be gone. I want my focus on the movement right here. So I know I don't like that branch. So maybe a couple of years ago, I cut this off so that would start this process. And now I've got some interesting shari, some natural shari right there. And then the live vein right there will start to swell around the deadwood, which creates that kind of cool effect that everybody likes. So this is on a very small tree, but if you do this to a bigger tree with a bigger branch, this is more noticeable. And then over time, I have a really big tree outside, but it's a little too big to bring in. But it's this exact concept, except the shari is about 2 inches wide and almost takes over the entire front, which is really nice. So if you do something like that, think about the design. This branch wasn't necessary. So you break it off or kill it, cut it, and then it'll die by itself and create a nice little shari. Same thing over here. And this is kind of neat. Okay, you can see it. Right there, this one right here, I broke off because it's too low for the design. Now, assuming my apex is somewhere around here. So this right here, I killed it, or I cut it. And then the live vein starts to to die right in there. I'm not sure if you can see that. But right there, that's where it's going to start to go down, and it gives you that really nice shard. So if you don't want to artificially do it, this is a cool way of doing it, or letting nature kind of do it on its own. And this is a really good technique for me to use, just because I have a lot of these trees everywhere. So that way I don't have to go in there and manually do shari on everything. I can plan for the design and the future of the tree by just kind of cutting branches like that. So then as it grows up, I have foliage here. So this right here, you got this really nice puffer foliage here. I've got really green foliage out here. Now it'd be nicer if I cut this back and probably get some here. And I got foliage all over here, inside here. And this tree could be styled in many different ways. You could do a shohin tree right here, right there with these low branches. Or you could do it a little higher and kind of accentuate this movement. You could tilt it. You could do many different things with this tree, but you have to kind of plan for the future of the tree by making cuts along the way. I think that's probably the easiest way to describe it. So this tree's, it's been sitting there for a long time. It's really nice. It just depends on what somebody wants to do with it. If somebody wants to do a shohin here, then you'd have to develop one of these branches here and let these grow, and then cut this one off, and then develop the tree right there. Yeah.
I have a question from someone. They asked, can you
Yes.
explain more about live veins? How many
Okay.
live veins are there in this tree? Does
So-
every branch have its own single vein?
So for the prostrata juniper, it's one per. So if I were to carve this out here, it's going to find a path somewhere else. Now that's for the prostrata juniper. For California, a lot for collected material, you've got one single one. For every live part, you got to find it, make sure you don't sever it. For this one, it tends to have a preferred zone. So it'll find it, you guys can't see that. They'll find it right there. But if I did that somewhere else, it wouldn't kill the tree. So if I created a shari somewhere, it's not going to necessarily kill a branch that's in the way. The prostrata will find a way to still stay alive. And that's why you can do manual shari on these trees and be really aggressive with them, because they will find a way to survive still. So it's an easier species to deal with if you're really worried about the vein. But what's cool is that if the safest way is if you do it my way, or the way I do it, I should say the nursery way. If you do it this way, it's going to kind of just do it on its own, and then you can call it out. You can kind of, accentuate it a little bit when you start to do it. So you can go in here and then you're like, oh, that's it right there. And you can actually start to see the other part of it start to die off or dry, and then you can kind of make it bigger. And then you're safe just because you can see the rest of the tree swell around there. So hopefully that answers that question.
I think it did.
Okay, so let's just go back to the big one here. So this one I've been working on, and you guys notice I don't have wire today. We're going to talk about mostly just straight up developing material. This is the one I was working on for a long time. It's really thick, and the plan for this one, and this is something to keep in mind too. Let's get a little closer. Is my plan for this tree was only using this section of the tree. Here you can see it, Michael. See, I had this really nice kind of semi-cascade over there.
So this is all deadwood?
Yeah, this is all going to be deadwood. So the plan for this one, and I had this plan about five, it was more kind of solidified about 5 years ago. So the tree is going to be here. So I wanted everything to grow strong over here. And because I didn't like this movement, if you guys, okay, I think you guys can see it. Yeah, let me cut this branch here. Since you guys know I don't care about this section, I'll cut it so you guys can see it. Can you guys see that? Yeah.
So this isn't really a good time to do heavy cuts on Junipers.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So Michael and I were talking about when to do cuts on junipers, and I have my branch cutter here and my big giant branch cutter, but I'm not going to be using it today on a lot of branches, just because the growing seasons for the junipers are spring and fall. That's when they start to push. Kind of getting the winter right now, so I would kind of not be as aggressive. Even though the prostrata, and this is another reason why prostrata junipers are so awesome, is you can be aggressive on them and they will push. I mean, I can reduce everything and they'll still push. It's more risky, especially when it's really, really hot, and cold. But if this was kind of earlier in the fall, maybe 2 months ago, then I'd be okay doing some bigger cuts. But that's something to consider as when you're working on your junipers, make sure you think about the species of juniper, not just juniper, but the species of juniper that you're working on as well. Certain junipers will respond very well to big cuts, some won't. So today, what I'll be talking about is just kind of the more conservative way of doing it. So going back to where I was, this is the section of the tree that I was going to save, this section over here. So I saved this. It's like, why did I save this then? Well, because I just wanted the overall tree to be healthy, and I wanted it to caliper up really quick. So other than putting this thing in the ground, which I have some trees in the ground, but when you have a lot of trees, it's sometimes difficult to manage a bunch in the ground. But this one, I wanted it to caliper up really quick, so I made sure to save this big branch over here. Now, the other reason I saved this was for a possible deadwood as well. So if you guys are a big fan of deadwood on junipers, which most people are, if you're developing material, you also have to think about the part that you plan on killing off. So it's not just the part that you're going to design the tree and all the live foliage, but the part that you plan on basically shredding down. And what you'll want to do is try to even ramify some of that section as well, because if you ramify it, then you won't end up with, and this is interesting because I'll do a sidetrack here really quick, but the junipers in the desert here, they're not grown all twisty. And in a humid environment, you're going to get all these twists and all this cool movement. Over here, the junipers, they kind of grow straight. Even with the California junipers, they're huge, but it's really hard to find something with twisty stuff. As prostratas tend to go straight, they'll kind of go up and they'll kind of branch out like this, just kind of like at angles. And you can see that's why the straight part is here. So if you're wanting deadwood that has twists, you're going to have to create it and kill it off later. And that's kind of a long-term plan that you guys will have to think about if you're really trying to develop some really nice material. So this part here, there's a branch here that I didn't cut off because that's going to contribute to it. And then I've got this straight part is going to be gone, but this one might be okay. So I might have to save this one a little bit and I've got some thicker branches here. But essentially, this is the tree over here. This is the section that I can cut off. But, with this tree, I can still make cuts. Even though it's winter. It's like I'm not looking for crazy growth, so I can still make cuts. And this is really just to reduce it a little bit, just so it's more manageable. All this stuff is gone anyways. But if I really want to encourage a lot of stuff in here, then I'm going to cut this back in early spring, really strong back here to try to develop something here if I wanted foliage in this middle section. If I don't, then in the spring, this whole section is going to get killed off and I'm just going to start working on that, which is probably what I'm going to do on this tree. I think it's time to finally stop this one because the trunk it's really thick. It's nice. So yeah, that's
Can
kind of
I
how,
ask maybe an ignorant question. I don't know that much about the different junipers. So prostrata, and then you've got Shimpaku junipers?
and then, yeah, you've got Shimpaku, and then I've got a San Jose. Let me bring it over. I've got San Jose behind me. What? Okay, so this is,
Wow.
okay, so this is a San Jose. I'll just hold it like this. And it's funny, this huge tree. And you guys can see the foliage looks a little bit more juvenile. It's spikier. And then the trunk and the bark is always going to be a little different too. This one's a little bit more, oh gosh, that's heavy. It's a little bit more knobby. And the thing about San Jose is that people like is that they grow with twists. So if you compare this, and I might see it pretty well, but if you compare the trunk to the prostrata there, this one has a little bit more turns.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys see that.
Yeah, you can see it. I can see
You can
it.
see it. So the San Jose's have a little bit more natural turning, but the problem with the turning it isn't always where you want it, and that's usually the case. Is it will turn, but it's not going to turn together. What we want in movement is we want movement always kind of going together and flowing together. It's going to turn, but it could turn completely reversed. and create this very strange opposite looking effect. So sometimes you got to go in there and train it, put some wire on it and change it. But if you end up with something like that, then you can already see that I killed off a bunch of stuff down here. I don't know if you guys see that. That's kind of hard to see.
Yeah.
But that was because I had basically three heads coming out in three different directions. And but at some point you got to make a choice. So, if you want to do it kind of slowly, you can be like, okay, this one's got to go. You have to make a choice. You can't have three go in the exact opposite direction. If these two were kind of going together, the two right here, that's why I have this pointer stick, this one and this one. So I was like, oh, that's not too bad. But now they're starting to twist away from each other. So this is one that you'd have to kind of go in and then make an evaluation again. You can see that in here, there's you guys probably can't see it, but there's a twisting one right here that maybe this one's going to finally say no, and you're going to end up going with the left one. Yeah.
Well, speaking of twisting, somebody asked, will you intentionally put twist into a developing trunk through wire? And how exaggerated do those twist and movement need to be not to be lost when the trunk thickens?
So you can put a lot of twists when you're able to put the twist, then put the twist. You can get it, if you have wire in there, it'll even start to swell up. Just make sure you try to take off the wire before it starts to eat in. That's the hardest thing to watch, is making sure you get the wire before it eats in. Because once it does, it's just in there.
So how big is it?
Twist it.
Yeah.
If you want something really tight, you got to do it really small, really small, really young, because if you're trying to do a really tight twist, but you have to make sure you do it at the base too. If you do it, like if the trunk comes up a little bit and then you do the twist, that looks awful, because then you have this little ball in the middle. So if you're going to do a twist, you got to do it at the base right away. And that's always kind of hard to do. What happens a lot on these San Jose's and the Prostratas is that they're going to grow. You're going to get branches everywhere. And when you kill off some of that stuff, it kind of starts to create character too, because the branches will start to come out in different places. And it's funny because I've discovered this through, some of it is through neglect, is watching the branches. If I leave something in the corner, I watch all the, I cut it and I see all the branches come out. And then I do it again and I come back to it 2 years later. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't put wire on that, but just all that natural kind of branches that came out created something interesting there. So if you can't do the twist on something older, you can still cut it back, kill some branches intentionally. And that will, because if you kill off a live vein, it's going to die at that part and then it's going to swell and then something's going to come out somewhere else. So it's not the end of the world. If you have an older tree and you can't put the twist in it, you can still do something like that, and that'll give you something different. Yeah, but if you can twist it at the beginning, twist at the beginning. Just make sure you take the wire off. Michael Roberts' question was, which one of these species grows faster and stronger? And that's interesting because this one is older, but this one, in the last 2 years, I discovered that this one really likes water. The San Jose really likes water. And these guys just took off. So they started slow, but then they just took off after giving like a lot of water. So these guys get more water now. But I'd say that before, when they were getting equal, they were kind of going at the same rate. This one was going a little bit faster, but then once I started putting more water on, this one started taking off. And the San Jose's, the downside and the reason people don't like them is because of the foliage is a little bit more juvenile, or at least it looks like it, and it's spikier. So it kind of hurts a little bit more when you're working on it. I mean, it's nothing like a needle juniper, but it'll still get you. Like right now, I don't want to put my hand in there. The Prostrata right there, I can work on that all day. It's not going to spike you that much. But I mean, so these grow fast. The San Jose and the Prostrata juniper grow fast. Dodi mentioned Shimpaku earlier, and then that's one that's going to grow. If you're talking about an original one, that's one that's going to grow really slow. Shimpakus just grow slow. The same with nanas, the juniper nanas. Those grow really slow too. This one, San Jose, kind of has similar foliage like a nana, but this one will grow at like 3 times or 4 times the speed of a nana. And the same with Shimpaku. These guys will grow maybe 5 times the speed as a Shimpaku. I know Ed Clark, and you guys probably all know Ed Clark. He was doing Itagawa Shimpaku, and he was able to get the caliper up faster versus the Kishus. And the Kishus, they grow really, really slow. So you don't see a lot of Kishus in mine. They just grow too slow. But when
Now,
you have
I had a
slope,
question
oh
about
yeah,
soil. You have
So-
it in organic soil. Would you recommend that you transition to bonsai soil before you do heavy styling? Do you do that all at once, or do you do it over time? Do you
So
bear
this
root
is
it? What's your
yeah,
process?
this is an interesting topic because since I operate a nursery, we always have to think about a little bit of what's cost effective as well. So you're going to find a lot of stuff in nursery soil mix that has aggregate in there, but still has a lot of peat moss in there, and that's more of a cost reason. Before I move into when it goes into a bonsai pot, or even before it, after I say I style that one, I'm going to take this one off because there's too many trees up here. If I'm going to do this one, I'm going to work on it, and say I decide to change the angle, then at that point, if I transplant it, I would put it in something a little bit higher draining on the bottom. What you guys decide to use is entirely up to you, but I would start thinking about some better soil mix at that point. And then when it goes into a pot, definitely for sure, then it's going in some really nice soil. But as it's growing, and this is something you have to keep in mind with your species of junipers too, is that Estrada juniper, San Jose, they grow in anything. They grow in anything. As long as you're watering them, they can grow quickly in anything. If you want to, if you want something fast draining, that's when it's, that's when it's in something smaller, and then you're going to start refining this thing a little bit more.
Can you bare root them?
Bare root these guys, I go aggressive on them, but I don't go that aggressive. I don't reduce everything. I'll always maintain at least some root ball when I'm working with these. I go really aggressive with these too, but I don't bare root it. Yeah, it might work. I'm not saying it's not gonna work. It's just that when I work on them, I usually don't go that extreme. I've had younger trees where maybe I've experimented and I have done that, and they were really stressed out. So I tend to leave a little bit of the root ball. But if I'm trying to fit this in a pot, I will go aggressive on that to fit it in a pot, as long as you're doing it the right time of the season.
Okay, so right time of the season, how much foliage do you maintain as a ratio of root ball when you are?
To balance the,
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael's question is, how much foliage would I keep in relation to the root ball? I know this is a big topic when it comes to black pines. There's a lot of balancing and other trees, but strata, you don't really have to worry about it too much. Yeah, that's why I have a lot of these trees. That's why I think they're great trees for beginners. I think they're fantastic for beginners because you can make a mistake on this and it'll come right back. If I'm reducing this, you tend to keep it balanced. I mean, I'm not going to have this huge tree. I'm going to reduce the roots to like nothing. No, you still got to have some sense of balance between the two, but it's not really that conscious when I'm doing it. If I want to fit this in a pot, and typically if it's going to be a pretty proportional pot, it's going to still be pretty balanced. I'm not fit this in a tiny pot, and that might be.
And do you find that the fibrous roots are all the way back to down into the core, or do you have to maintain a lot of the tip?
Oh, you mean like the feeder roots? They're everywhere on this thing. Yeah, and even if you have a taproot, you can cut that back. These guys grow just like their foliage grows fast. The roots grow fast. So this one is definitely root bound already in this guy. If I transplant this, it'll grow even faster. Yeah. Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So I'm gonna bring another tree over. Okay, so this is another tree. Yeah, this is such nice material. And it's only, like I said, the whole reason why we're talking today is about this material didn't look like this a few years ago. This is all developed material. So, and this is the stuff that people love to see at demos because you can create a tree quickly. So the only reason I'm cutting right now is so you guys can see inside. Because since I have a lot of experience with these trees, I know that by next spring, I'm going to have to do this again. And since I don't plan on working on it until then, I'm not really worried about this foliage here. Okay. So this one has a really cool twist. Right in here, it's pretty gnarly right here. That's pretty interesting. And this is the part, this was killed off. And you can see that it starts to, I don't know if you guys can see that. Dodie, can you see that okay?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, this is what I was talking about. This
Right,
branch
that's
right
worse. We can't see anything.
So this branch was killed off. I killed this one off. And see how it's starting to shari up in here? And it's following the twist of the trunk as well, right in here. And here's a live one, and this one kind of goes back this way. This vein kind of comes back this way, but this whole part is going to start to die. And that's kind of that cool thing is when you have a twisted trunk and you kill off a branch, it's going to start to, it's going to start to dry up in a certain spot in that trunk right there. And that's where you'll start to see that twist, and it'll start to accentuate the more you do that. So if I do one on this side, I don't think I have one on this side, but if I did one on, I don't. But if I did one on this side, then it probably would have it on that side as well. But now that I see where this is going, I could take my tools in here and I could make that even more pronounced. So this tree here, I'll put it back further. I mean, you guys can already see the style of it. I mean, it's just an informal upright, but you can see that if I put an apex right here and cut this up and trimmed it, that this tree would be done in a single styling. But this tree here was probably about the same 5 to 7 years as well of training. So I know that most of the people on this call are a little bit more experienced when it comes to the bonsai. So if you have material, the best time to start doing this is kind of right now, or is earlier than now. But if you haven't done it, then start to think about your designs and kind of going forward. So every season, going back to when I'm doing work in the nursery, is every spring, right before spring, I'll walk through the bed that all these are located in, and I'll have this branch cutter, this one right here. And then I'll go in and be like, well, there's a pocket branch, and this is where it's good to know your branches, which are kind of the faulty branches that you guys don't like. There's a pocket branch, this one, and then I'll cut it. And I won't cut it all the way flat. I'll save a little bit in case I want to do something with it later. So don't go full and cut it flush. Save a little bit. Let that thing kind of struggle, and you want it to struggle. And then so you cut off your pocket branch, you cut off eye pokers, and you cut off all those parallel branches, bar branches. You start to make those decisions. So then you cut those, and then the tree will start to develop slowly. And as it develops more branches, the ideal branches will start to come out. And then by the time you're ready to bring it somewhere to style, or you have some friends over and you guys want to work on it together, then you guys have this whole tree to finish, and you'll be really happy with it at the end. But the only way for you guys to get there is kind of every season to go in there, cut, evaluate the tree, and it'll change too. Some trees like that first one I showed you, originally I thought it was going to be an informal upright, but I really didn't like that straight part. So then I decided to change the design to the semi-cascade, and then started focusing all my efforts there. Yeah.
You used a term pocket branch?
Yeah, a pocket branch it's in the curve. So if you have a branch that's like, if you have the trunk is like this, is a curve like that. So the pocket branch is on the inside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that is a pocket branch that's interrupting the movement of the tree. So the movement's going like this. And if you have a branch right there, and it interrupts it because your eyes go shooting this way instead of following the trunk line. So those are usually easy ones to find. For example, on this one, maybe the little one's easier. Oh, nope, the little one, I already cut it. But this one, you can see that there's a branch there and there. The main trunk is here, this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got this one here that's definitely conflicting with this one, and it's too tall. So probably I would cut it halfway so it stops growing thicker, so that this one will start to grow thicker. And then this one will have a little bit of a kind of up and down, or maybe it'll be eliminated later. And then this gin here will be reduced as well. So the gins, they start the shari, but it doesn't mean you have to keep the entire gin the whole time. You can reduce that down so that your eye movement doesn't go that way. See how right now it goes like this, the movement's going like this, and then that branch is coming, that dead branch is coming out this way. Well, that's interrupting your eye movement. Even though it's a gin, it's white, so it's kind of camouflaged back there, but it's still there. So this is one that you would want to cut back, reduce a little bit, or do kind of a indentation there. So it looks like it snapped off by itself. Yeah. So as you're going through.
With the question somebody asked, do
Mhm.
you have any concern that the trunk scar will be worse if you didn't want the gin in that location later on?
No, the funny thing is when you let the tree do its own thing, it's almost like nature is always going to do a better job than us of creating kind of imperfections. And the scar there is actually, I've always found it to contribute to it. Everybody, if I show a piece of material, everybody goes right to the dead one and says, that's the coolest part of the tree. So I did the demo at Kofukai, I think it was 2 weeks ago. And everybody, we were talking about the front, and everybody chose the dead branch that I cut off and had died back. Everybody gravitates to it. So it's funny because you might be worried, oh, that's gonna look ugly. But actually, nature's just gonna do its thing. Even if I snap that off, or I probably would want to at least control the snap right there, it would still look really cool compared to just flush or just live vein. If this was just a curve, if that part was just a curve with the live vein, it'd be so boring. It's kind of that what nature does, and its natural aging and decay that makes the tree look really cool. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about that. Yeah, that'd be something that you'd think you'd have to worry about, but then once it happens, and the only reason I know this is because I've done it so many times, it's always, oh, that's the coolest part of the tree. And then you try everything to focus your efforts around it. And then you start using your carving tools to even maybe accentuate it a little bit more, make it look more pronounced. Yeah. Hopefully that answers that person's question. But I would never stress about something like that. Like if you look at collected material, we're always looking for stuff that we're always drawn to the stuff that has this really cool dead wood, and that's just all done by the elements. And it's really even hard for us, even people that are really good at carving, to replicate what nature does. Some of it's just impossible to do. Yeah.
Can
Okay.
you explain the technique for killing the branch again? Or is it
Okay,
just
yeah,
cutting it
actually,
back below
yeah,
the fruit?
that's a good point. I meant to touch on that. So when I cut this branch, like the only way for this to die is for it to struggle. Now, how the branches struggle and how branches die on a juniper is when it has no sun. So if you cut a branch down here and the apex is strong and it's shading this whole area, this branch is going to die. It's just going to die. It just can't do anything. If there's no sun touching this, it's going to die. So knowing that, then you know how to train the branch. If you have all this growth up here, or say I have that San Jose, if I have that huge mound of foliage and I cut something down here, that's most likely going to die just because the tree's doing what it does naturally, which is favor the apex and kill those lower branches. On black pines, we're trying to save those lower branches. That's why we balance candle cutting. That's why we spend all this time taking extra care on those lower branches, because we don't want them to die because the apex wants to kill them off. So that's why we balance it. We do the candle cutting first here, bottom, then we kind of go up. But if we're trying to kill it, then you cut it and then you, in a way, starve it. It doesn't have the sun and it's just going to die on its own. Michael asked me if I peel the bark off right away. So since I have a lot of trees, I've done it where I peel the bark. Yeah, that guarantees nothing's going to grow there. And I've done it where I just cut it. And usually when I just cut it and it's basically starved from sunlight, it's just going to die. Yeah. Maybe you'll get a little bit of buds, but it'll be so weak. It'll struggle for a little bit. But if you're still not if I aim, say the sun's coming up from that direction, if I don't aim it that way and I have it like this on this side, on the north side, that branch has no chance. So it's funny because having a nursery is, I have to keep spacing between all my trees for that reason. It's not just for junipers, it's for every type of tree. If it's not getting sun from every direction, I'm going to have a dead section on the north side. I've got to make sure it gets rotated. If I've got them too close together, then I've got no low branches. All the branches are going to reach for the sky. They're going to get all the apex up here. And so all these are going to be super healthy. And the healthier these are, the weaker these are going to be. And I think that's a pretty important thing to know when you're working with the plants. And most people don't have this problem because they don't have 50 trees clumped up together. They just got one. So if people, say you're trying to kill off a branch, you might, funny thing is you might have a harder time doing it just because you don't have another tree that's maybe sitting right here also shading that section. So
now when you say kill the branch and you say cut it, are you cutting it off or are you just cutting into it?
I'm cutting it shorter because I always like to keep, so this one right here is about 2.5, 3 inches that I saved. And I knew I wasn't going to use that as a side branch. That was never the intention. But I saved that just in case, because when you can't grow back a gin, unfortunately. So the most you can only reduce it. So if it's in a kind of a pre-designed phase, I want to save still more than I necessarily need for the design, because I can always shorten this. So this one, all I did was, so say I've got this branch, all I did was cut it short, maybe to here. Oops, that was a really bad cut. So I go like this. So this was on a, say this was on a tree, you know. Okay, and then I cut off some branches. Now, if this is not getting sun, let me move this out of frame so you guys can see it. There we go. So this, say this was on the bottom. If it's not getting any sun, it's going to die off. I did this cut. This one shocks that branch pretty strong. And then if it's in the spring, everything's going to favor the top. And if I really want to kill, then I do something like this, right? We cut off all the foliage. And even if you save some, even if you save a little bit, so say you save a little bit, these will, if it's not getting sun, these will all die off. They'll turn yellow and they'll die. And then this whole branch will die. And then from this point, it's going to start to, you know, start to shard again. It's going to start to die off inside. You could, I don't have the tool. I do have the tool. I have all my tools. So you could, you know, you could gin it and you could take off all the bark, right? You could do that too. That's going to guarantee that it's dead. But if you don't have the time, you know, and you're trying to get through a bunch of trees, then you can, I'm trying to gin this one. Then you can just do this. And if you starve it of sunlight, it's going to die off anyways. And it'll start to lose its bark naturally like this. So you kind of see.
Okay, I have a couple more questions.
Yes.
Do you grow a sacrifice branch for thickening and defoliate between the internodes except the top on junipers like a Japanese black pine?
Okay, so that felt like two questions. Let's go to the first one. Do I grow a sacrifice branch? Let's go with that one first. Yes, I do grow sacrifice branches. So if I like the first tree has the biggest sacrifice branch. In fact, it's a sacrifice apex. So yes, if I know I want it to caliper up quickly, then I'm going to save a branch that is just has this huge, you know, a big part of the tree, and it's just powering the whole tree and making it grow, you know, make the trunk thicken up really quick. I'm going to save that. So on that one, I save the main one, and I'm going to gin that whole thing in the spring. So yes. And then the second question was, can you repeat that again, Dodie?
Do you defoliate between the internodes except the top on junipers like a Japanese black pine?
Defoliate the inner, but in between the internodes.
Are they
For the junipers, I'm not really worried about defoliating a juniper. If we're talking about deciduous, did you hear that, Michael? I don't understand.
I don't understand.
I don't fully
Yeah.
understand it. Maybe
I think what they're asking about is, do you take off all of this stuff here and just leave that so that it will grow?
Oh, you mean just leave the apex of
removing
the
the
branch.
needle so it doesn't shed the lower branches.
Removing the needle.
Well, in this case, it's going to be
Removing the inner piece to save this. And this is okay. So how Michael and I might understand the question, I'm not sure if it's correct, is would we, let me reduce this so it's a single branch. So actually I could use this guy. Let me just turn this. Is say would I reduce this section to grow this section so that to kind of further this section? That's what I'm assuming the question is, and this is where it's important to know the species of your trees. With the juniper like this, I'm not going to, I don't really have to touch this. I can get rid of stuff. Yes, I will cut stuff that I don't necessarily don't want. So if you're talking about defoliation, I guess you could say, yes, I'm going to get rid of things I definitely don't want to focus my efforts to the apex if I want to grow this faster. So I guess if that was the question, then yes, I would do something like that. Would I go so extreme as to cut all this off? No, I wouldn't go that extreme. But definitely, if I'm trying to lengthen a branch or even caliper up a branch, thicken a branch, then yes, I'm going to kind of Unless I've got branches that I think are really good for secondaries, you know, but if I got things that are not contributing, like the things I just cut, yeah, you can cut those.
So would it, the question I'm gonna ask is, would it thicken faster if you were to leave all these side branches and let the whole thing?
Oh yeah, well, it might not thicken where you want it to. You're good. If you have a bunch of side ones, you're gonna find that if you have this point in a certain direction, you might find that it's not gonna thicken this one up that fast, it's gonna thicken up this one. And you know, so say you got this one coming off like this, and this is going to depend on how the tree wants to grow. We try to manipulate it as much as possible. We can manipulate it by cutting it so it has to direct it a certain way. But say you got two, the sun's coming this one, you're fertilizing it heavily, you're watering it really nice, it might favor this guy, and it might end up weakening this one. And if this is the one that you wanted to make it stronger, then now you've got to cut this one and you got to start all over again. So you just you can let the tree do its thing, or you can cut it back. Yeah, watch the tree. Yeah. See, I go through a lot of my material, sit in the nursery. So I'm and it's kind of nice because, you know, if you watch the kettle, you know, the water boil is just, it's not going to happen if you're watching it. But for my trees, since I'm looking at them maybe a month in between, sometimes even 3 months in between, I see the change, like the drastic change. It's kind of like if you have a puppy, it's like you don't notice them get big, and then suddenly they're big. But it's like for the tree, it's like you might this branch wasn't there, and I come back a month later, I'm like, whoa, okay, that's there now. And I'll come back a month later, and this one's all the way out of here, and this is weaker, and I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah. You start to see kind of big changes in your tree if you kind of take a step back. Yeah.
Do you ever cut back on the apex to help the bottom to grow?
Yeah, you have to. That's really important. The apex is always going to dominate the tree. Let me just put this back here because it looks nicer. If I let this grow, and there's already a problem here, I've got some thick branches growing here, right here. So if I leave that, that's going to suck the energy from down here. Now, if you fertilize it, water it really well, take care of it really well, make sure there's no pests, yeah, you're still going to have strong growth everywhere. But if I favor this one and I don't cut it and I just let it go, yeah, it's going to eventually weaken it. And that's where those kind of dead branches happen, is because this one starts to block out the sun. So I guess most people don't touch on this, but you got to pay attention to the sun. you got to pay attention to the position of your tree and then where it's growing strong. Usually you can tell how a tree is positioned just by, if you bring in a piece of material and you set it on the table, you can be like, okay, that side is on that, you know, that is facing that direction. This is the north side. If they're not rotating their tree, you can immediately see it. Or you can see they have this in the shade. That foliage is not strong, healthy foliage. It's a little leggy. It's a little weak, a little deeper green. So sometimes you can tell just by looking at the foliage.
So talk a little bit about balancing the growth during the initial part of the development.
Okay, so Michael's asking about balancing the growth on the initial development. So I touched on every season, I'm going in there and making cuts to bottom branches I don't like. I'm making cuts to faulty branches I don't like. I also go in there, and that's what that last question was, and I will cut off a major apex branch if it's dominating too much. So if I see, and that's the balance I think you're talking about. If I see a branch over here and it's going off over here, and these things will grow crazy because it wants to grow to be this huge shrub. A good way to know how your tree is going to grow is also look at the tree in a landscape to see how it's growing, so you can see how it's going to, what the tree is favoring, and if you need to kind of halt it, then you know where it's going, where the problem's going to start to rise. So if you've got branches going off all the way out here, then I'm going to be like, and I've got 3 apexes going on, I'm going to get rid of 2. Yeah, and that's going to do a couple things. First, that's going to stop reverse taper. Right. So if I'm up here and say my apex and my trunk is going to be around this area, I want to make sure that my taper is going to be good going up to that point. And if I've got 3 apexes there, not only is, say, cutting 2 of them off going to balance it and force some focus down here, but it's also going to prevent reverse taper. So those are things that you kind of have to consider as you're designing.
So you wouldn't touch
those ones if they get to the length that I like it. Yes. Yeah. But also at some point you have to, because, well, this is interesting because I don't know if you guys know Mr. Che. He does the Huntington Chinese garden, but he really focuses on those low branches, and he'll let them grow out to 6 feet long to get it to exactly the caliper that he wants it. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Junipers like this is too, if I wanted this one thicker, it's too early to cut. Say I wanted it as thick as this, is way too early to cut. But if, you know, if I'm happy with it and I feel like the side branches is going to hide that a little bit, then I'll cut. So you gotta base it on, and this is practice with design. You gotta cut it back when you feel that it's the taper on the branch itself is to your satisfaction, and that's gonna be different from everybody. Yeah, but Mr. Che's got stuff going 6 feet out, and I'm like, whoa, it's just low branch sitting down there, and the only reason is because he wants to caliper that up as thick as possible, just so he can cut it all the way back and start developing secondaries. And you should know that. You know this too, because you do this too. You're a deciduous person. All right.
Now, I have another question I'd like to read. It says, the amount of movement you put in a branch, does it differ from a small tree to a large tree? Or is the movement based on your final goal for the tree? You see some trees with some crazy movement and others with a little bit of movement. Can you explain creating movement and a little more on juvenile plant?
Okay, so movement. Now this is an interesting question, because I think everybody ends up with material at different stages. Not everybody's going to be able to create it from very young material. So if you have movement, that's kind of, I think I touched on this a little bit. If you have material that's older, you're going to have to work with what you kind of have and try to select branches to turn it certain ways. Now you can always, you know, if you're talking about Shohin, you can always grow a branch and then grow another branch, another apex, another leader, and you can create movement that way as well. If it's young enough, then just create, you know, put the movement into the trunk right away. How old it is to do that is going to depend on your skill level of bending. If you know how to bend thicker branches, then put the movement in there. If you know how to raffia, if you know how to do that, and you know how to, you know, carve in there and split the branch a little bit, then do that, and you can put a little bit of movement. If you have something straight like this and it's thick, yes, you can put some movement in it. You can always put some movement in it, even if it's breaking it, as long as you have like a controlled break. If it's young and you can put small wire on it, then go ahead and bend it. As for that, when you're talking about movement, and this is interesting when it comes to design, is if you go to workshops and people just bring in their own tree to work on, since we can't alter the movement right at that moment, at least without doing something drastic, we're always first looking at the tree to see what movement is, or what is the tree gravitating toward? What style is the tree gravitating toward? I personally don't like to force a tree into a certain way. So I'm going to look at the tree and evaluate what the movement is kind of lending itself to. Is it going toward a slant style? Is it going to an informal upright? Is it going to a semi-cascade, a cascade, a raft? Whatever it is, you have to look at it and see where it's going. At that point, it's easier to accentuate that movement that the tree is leaning toward than change the whole thing and focus on something different. So Mike is, we're talking about kind of, I try not to fight the tree. Now you can always fight the tree. Like for example, I'm not gonna turn it too much to otherwise the soils will fall out. But I could always turn this, oh, that's really heavy. But just imagine that I turn it this way. Yeah, I could force a cascade. I could force a semi-cascade, but the movement right here does not lend itself to it. It's just not good movement for that. So this one lends itself perfectly to an informal upright. And you got to go with the tree at some point. If you haven't put the movement in early, you're not, you know, it's harder to fight the tree. And the tree, you're going to know it. When you see a tree, you're going to be like, that person tried to force it a little bit too much, and the tree is just not liking it. So how you would do this is, say you really want a slant style tree, or say you really want an informal or a semi-cascade. That's where you go into a nursery and you look for material that has the movement, or at least look for material where it's got a branch that you can change the movement in it to suit that tree that you want. So pull the first tree up. All right. So this is one that, yeah, this is a slant. You could do a slant, kind of a slant. You could do informal upright right there. If I want to slant it, it's kind of a slant, but it goes this way. You could cascade it and do it here. You could. It's got a knee, or what we call a knee, or a kind of a dip right there at the turn. But this one, to me, the movement of it coming out to here, well, partially because I created it. And I just really like this section. It doesn't mean that, somebody else likes it, but that's the one that I like. Some people might see this and be like, well, there's a tree perfectly right there. But what I didn't like about this informal upright was that this turn right here was too abrupt. And this branch right here comes off straight off of the turn. That's the worst branch to have. So if you've got movement going like this, and you've got a branch coming off right at that angle, your eye just goes just like that. That's where it goes. It goes straight over there. So that branch has to be gone. So when I was evaluating this in the nursery, it was, this is going to be gone, or this is going to be gone. But one of them, because they fight with each other. So which one did I like more? I like this one more. So this is one that's, it was older already when I got it. Like I said, it was like 5 years old. So I couldn't really put movement down here in the base. And that's what you would do with younger stuff, is you put movement in the base. But then I'd be like, okay, where can I develop the branches to suit that movement in the style that I wanted? Okay, that should answer the question.
Good.
Okay, other question. How are we doing on time? We doing okay?
Doing great. It's only 7:35.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think since most people see me just talk on the screen, I think, I'd like to open it up to more questions. So since this is a lot more interactive, you guys kind of at least generally know what I do in the nursery now. Is in the spring, I go in there with these guys and I design trees 5 years out. So I'd be like, I choose those branches, I balance the apex like Mike was talking about. And I get rid of faulty branches as I go. And you can see it, Mike can see a bunch. There's a whole bunch here. Like right here, there's 3 parallels. You can't see it, but there's 3 branches, 1, 2, 3, like that. And they were just parallel and go straight up. So I was like, I like this one. So those were gone. Yeah. So that's kind of what I do. How do you kind of get to that point where you can make these choices is you just have to practice. So if you have smaller material at home, say for example, it's like this one, let's get that back a little bit. So say you have like something like this, this is good material to play around with. I mean, this has all this wacky movement, and that's what you guys should start with. If you can find kind of juniper material, even, I mean, beginner, even intermediate, it's, you gotta, to practice, you just gotta grab material and you gotta be patient, and you gotta start thinking about where you want the tree to be 5 years from, not necessarily altering. So for example, like if somebody wanted to bend this whole thing over, yeah, technically you could, but you also have to ask, like, why are you doing it? Is there a legitimate reason to do it? If there isn't, don't just bend just to bend. See where the tree wants to lead you. Yeah.
On
But
that particular tree, Jason, what do you see for the future of that particular tree?
Yeah, this is a funny one. That's why it's been sitting in my nursery for a while. So this is one I would open up to the audience. This is not a live demo like I did. So this one is interesting because the movement is just so ugly. Like, it's beautiful right down here, right? This Shari is nice. Shorten this up so your eye doesn't go straight this way. You see that, right? Right,
Yeah.
Jody? So this one shoots off like this. So this one has to be reduced so that your eye focuses to this movement. Where the issue is right here, is that it's bare and this movement is really ugly. So it's like, yeah, you could do it. This one you could do an informal upright. Let's assume that this is the front. If that's the front, this has to go, right? Okay. I did that just so you guys can see it clear. So if this was the movement, I've got this. I could have created an apex here, but it's got this. And then what do you do with stuff like this? Now you got 2 choices, or a couple choices. I guess you could bend it, you could hide it, you could cut it. So you could shorten the tree, maybe do something with this, maybe use this one and grow this one, but that would take a little longer because this is so thin. And this one would have a pretty drastic taper change. But right around here, the reverse taper starts right around this area, right around there. And right there is where it starts to get reverse taper. So really this part of the tree up here is pretty ugly. If you had to do a tree here, a really simple one would probably just be apex here. And then you'd hide this section here. So if I didn't want to cut it, I'd camouflage it. How do you camouflage it? You camouflage it by putting foliage in front of it. So you bend this little branch over to the front here and create a pad layer right there. And then maybe create an apex from this little guy up here, maybe shorten this one down, or you can create an apex from this. Or you could point this side to the sun, because this side goes to the sun. You can point that side to the sun, and then you'll get, you know, this one will probably grow out faster, and these will grow in. So that's, and then there's interesting movement over here. So if there's movement over here, if you like this side, oh, this one's interesting. I didn't look at this one before.
And that looks better to me.
Yeah, that looks pretty good too. Okay, so I haven't looked at this one, but if I did this one, I'd cut this one here, the eye poker, and then I'd probably go up to here still, and then cut right around here, right there, develop this, hard to see, but there's a little branch right here. That would probably be a good apex. Actually, that's pretty nice. So we ended up designing it together, Dodie. I think this is our friend.
Would you ever do a graft on the trunk?
So the prostratas are really good, are probably the most popular grafting for the rootstock because of the qualities of the trunk. They're super fast growing, super resilient, and they're strong trees. So yes, people graft Shimpaku on this all the time. And that's what most people like to do. They'll graft onto where they want to create new branches, and then they'll let those grow out and cut everything back. Yeah. So this is a nice front. Yeah, I like this. So that's a very, very common thing to do on prostratas. And that's why people love them too, but you don't have to. So for the smaller trees, it looks better grafted because you got tighter foliage, more compact. But for the bigger ones, you can still leave the prostrata growth on there. It still looks okay because they're kind of, they're more mature. They look pretty nice. Yeah.
For the back branch, that skinny back branch that goes left
This
to
one?
right, yeah, that one.
Mhm.
This is my lack of knowledge. If you cut the tips back, will it force it to bud back closer to the trunk?
See here?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, okay. So if you cut these off right here, will it bud in here?
yes.
Yeah, it will. It will. I mean, this one's already budding back everywhere. As long as you keep the tree healthy, it's going to. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't cut off all that because that's where I would essentially starve. You know, I'd kill the branch. You can cut back a little bit more, and that's really just stopping the apical dominance over there, stopping this growth, so you can get some buds there. Yeah, and then point that toward the sun this way. Yeah, and then you'll get some stuff here. This has definitely been sitting this way. Actually, no, I know where this was sitting. Yeah, it was against the wall like that. So all this was growing, and you could tell, you know, this side's like nothing going on here. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's a nice front. I like that. Good choice. Yeah. Okay. All right. Other questions?
I don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay. Bring the big one in. Which big one? Oh, it's really big. And I think it's rooted into the ground. Yeah, there's a big one. Let me see. Well, I could bring this one up, and then let's see what we can do with this one. This was a hard one though. Let's take it out. Oh, will it come out? Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of weeds.
Wow.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay, so you know, like I said, it's not the best time of season to be doing this.
Lots of findings.
Yeah, there's a lot. This thing is big roots like crazy. But you also see a lot of fertilizer on here right now, right? You see it? So we keep our stuff fertilized really well. We have
You use Apex.
I use Apex. I like
20 to 22.
Oh, I forgot what it doesn't have that much nitrogen. It's not over 20. Yeah, I think so. It doesn't have that much nitrogen. Too much nitrogen. It shoots out too quickly. Yeah, a little bit leggy, a little too strong. So a little bit more balanced. I find it to be better. But the Apex is a good one.
So I like to tell people to use 14, 14, 14
Yeah,
Repeat what he's saying. We can't.
Mike's talking, so we're talking about fertilizer. He's talking about 14, 14, 14. I like to use something a little bit more balanced too, like that. And it just kind of, the overall health of the tree is just, it's more balanced and it tends to grow how it wants to grow. So I've got so if this was in the nursery.
Check it out. This trunk is 3 inches across at the soil line.
How big is it?
Three.
3
But
inches?
it looks, yeah, but it's nice. And this is a good, a good example of those 3. And this actually had 4. So the San Jose has got 4. It was basically like a claw coming up. And it was really just trying to, oh, cool, he's got a block so it doesn't keep falling over. That's fine. I'll just hold it. So this had the claw, had 4 coming up. So basically I killed off part of it because this one was just coming out all the way over here. And sometimes that's just, you got to make a decision. So right now this has 2 still, but this one has more going on. And it's hard to see because it's got all this foliage on it, but it's not really time for me to do heavy cuts. I mean, I could cut some. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of not the time. And really the cuts I'm doing are just to the apex and you're not going to see a lot. But say I have, and this is interesting. Oh, it's really hard for you guys to see, but I've got all this crazy stuff going on up here and none of it contributes to anything. And this is one where I'll thin out a little bit, but you can see how bad these can get.
Wow.
Right? You can see this big tangled web in here. And most likely I will find a spider in here. There's no doubt I'm gonna find it, but I'll cut a little bit because it's not too bad right now. So these 2 sit next to each other. Yeah, those aren't gonna work with each other. And you might not have a total plan going into this. There's a spider. All right, I found him. Let me get rid of him. That's the thing with these guys. Spiders love them. Yeah. And just remember all the branches you're cutting, nothing is going to be in the final design of the tree. Right now, you're just trying to find the trunk line and you're trying to keep foliage on it just so it stays healthy. So I got an interesting turn here on this one. This one goes this way, right? And that's an interesting line there. So you can see how San Jose's grow. Where's that little stick? I got a line here, a trunk line there. That's in frame. Got a trunk line here. And then I got this one here. This is actually on the other side. This one, there's a gap here. This branch right here is from this branch at the back, from this trunk at the back. So I've got a conflict there that I have to resolve. And I have to decide at this point if I prefer the 2 back here, or do I prefer this one? Or can I make them work together? Or can I kill one off? This is a hard one. So if you're not entirely sure, you can still reduce. I'm not going to reduce them nearly as much as I usually do. It's not tons to them. I'll still reduce some. Like these thick branches over here, they're already too thick. I'm already too far out from where I plan on having my low branches. I'm already way out here. And it's already starting to have something. And I'm really reducing only a little. It looks like I'm reducing a lot, but there's a lot of branches in here.
So late fall or mid fall?
Yeah, mid fall.
Early spring, kind of go in and open it up to find.
Or early fall too.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically right.
Find your line and see.
We have a lot of questions that have come in.
Oh, please ask me. Yeah, this is one that's hard to do for you guys to see because I can see what's going on, but there's no way you guys can. There's just too much foliage. But I'm thinning out. We were talking about thinning out the apex a little bit, and that's what's going on here. Opening it up. When you open it up, that's so the sun can get in. And that's why you have all this yellow. It's just because the sun's not getting in. So people are like, oh, my tree's dying. No, your tree is just not able to power those guys inside. If you open up your tree, then you'll start to get buds inside. And that's all you have to do is you have to thin it out. Thin out your junipers. Yeah, all junipers are the same like that. Once you have too much sitting on the outside. Yeah, go ahead, Dodie.
One of the questions is, does your method of killing branches create a different aesthetic when it comes to how the final deadwood looks compared to just removing the bark like a traditional gin?
It's, like I was saying earlier, the way sometimes I'm doing this mostly as a time constraint. Um, I don't have time to if I have a bunch of trees, I'm not going to, if the effect is the same as the branches go die or it's going to get ginned off, I might not peel it just because I don't have the time to. Will it change it? Yes. If you artificially do it, you might not be following maybe the line that the tree wants to go, or maybe exactly where that live vein is perfectly right now. It won't necessarily kill the tree because if it's a prostrata, it's going to find a way to survive. It's going to find another line. But if you do it artificially, you might find that the tree is struggling. It'll struggle a little bit. And how do I know this? Because I've tried it. So I've done some artificially, I've done some naturally. The natural ones always look the best, just because it's going to just start to decay and start to just kind of dry up in that spot. And then once it does, then you got it. You know exactly where it is. So it's the safer bet. But yeah, you can artificially do it as long as you're doing it with the right species of tree. You don't want girdle your tree.
Another question is, one of the things that he struggles with is the long branches with no foliage, but only at the tip. How much of that foliage should I remove to encourage back budding on the branch without accidentally killing it?
So if you're not getting a lot of buds at all, then you have to evaluate your care on it. Because it should always be that you're trimming. Every growing season, you should be like, oh, I got cut again. Oh, I got cut again. And if you're not able to, we got to think about why, what's going on. Without looking at the tree, then you'd have to be like, okay, how's my fertilizing? How's my watering? How's my soil? How's do I have pests on the tree? How's my light? You have to identify those things. It's kind of, at the nursery, I have a lot of those variables already stabilized or standard, so that if something starts to deviate, I can be like, okay, it can't be those things, so it must be this thing. But you really should be getting buds. You should be getting back buds. If it's long at the ends, you should be getting them inside. I don't like to cut those ends. If you're trying to make the tree healthy or that branch healthy, I don't like to cut those ends. I like to let them grow freely until I start to see it. Then I'll start to cut it back. Once I start to see those buds come out and they start to get strong, then I know that they can survive on their own, so it doesn't need that leader anymore. But I think in something like that where you're not getting anything, you're going to have to identify what maybe the root cause could be, that's preventing that. Yeah, and it could be as simple as sun.
That's right. How much root development do you do during the 5 to 7 year process? Do you ever take the tree out just to try to make choices about the root aesthetics?
The roots, I'll cut in. I tend to cut ugly stuff. You can go in there and you can spread the roots a little bit. The prostratas, they don't tend to grow just straight down. They tend to go out wide. I mean, look at this can. It's not even on the bottom here. It spreads out like this. So the roots here will tend to grow out this way. So I don't have to worry about that too much. Some other trees, if you don't put a block underneath or you just let it, it'll just go straight down and grow narrow. So these ones I don't worry about too much. Yeah.
Okay.
But on other species and that's, you got to check your species.
Another question, if you do end up with inverse taper somewhere, do you consider carving out the taper and trying to heal that area? Or do you pretty much just have to cut below the area of the inverse taper?
So yes, if you do, and that's a trick that a lot of people would use with deadwood is they will, here, I'll show you guys. You'll start to see the line a little bit. They will use carving to hide inverse taper or reverse taper. Because once it's dead and it's, that kind of like the light color, then it starts to, your eye draws straight to the live vein. So that's one way you can do it. You don't always have to cut it. But if you cut it, yes, that'll solve it. If you have it at the apex and you start it and you're very far away from like a design and you're still developing the material, then yeah, just cut it. That way you don't have to deal with it that much, unless you have another plan for it. If you have another plan, but I don't like these weird gems here at the top. I like them down at the base because that's where it should happen naturally. It should be like somewhere around here. So you save this stuff. When it's like you have this long thing, and then you got reverse taper, and then you got Jin coming out of it, it looks a little strange. But that's me.
Okay. Another question is, when you're developing structure and you get a branch in the position that you want, how do you slow it down and stop it from over thickening while developing the other branches of the tree?
Okay, so that's exactly what I've been doing on some of this right now, is I'm stopping the apex. So if I cut this right here, if I cut that, even just a little tiny cut like that is going to stop that branch from growing out that way. Now, because this branch looks, I'm messing with this branch a lot, just because it's probably not going to be part of the design. So I'm kind of playing with it. So if I have this and I cut it, then that little cut stops it right away, and then you go get lateral growth. So let's go focus here, because it can't focus here anymore because it's gone. So let's go focus there. So when you're happy with the caliper of that, that's when you cut it back. Now, how what determines when you're happy? That's up to you, up to the artist. Well, that's looking a little bit better. Oh, there's another spider.
So now that you've thinned it out some, do you have a sense of what you want to do with this tree?
Let's see. So I've thinned it out a little bit. It's not like fantastic, but there's a couple things. I've got movement here. Now, I'll try not to find faults in the tree, like on the base here, because all this is alterable. What you're looking for is how can you make it better or go a certain direction. And if you don't have low stuff, like, don't worry about that either, but doing what we've been talking about for the last, this session is about clearing space so that all that low stuff can happen, right? All I'm doing right now is looking at trunk line. So I've got this guy here, and it's like, that shoots off back this way. And you always have to think about possible fronts. So if you can't find a front, people say find the back. And if you don't like a certain section, that's the back. But if you have nothing on it still, you got to keep your options open. So if I'm doing this, I'm not always identifying the front, because just like the tree we just did a second ago, Dodie, that one that you saw, that front that we ended up going with, like, yeah, I just found that one right now too when I was turning it around, because I didn't take a close look at it until right now. And I was like, yeah, that can change. So don't, we're just trying to get some direction. It doesn't have to be the final direction. And don't, I guess, beat yourself up by not getting it perfect, because it's not about that. It's not about that. If you're working on oh, that's where the spider is. Oh, that was a big one too. Yeah. Okay, so I've cleared it out. So at this point, I'm like, not really sure exactly where the front is. What I do know is that there's problems with the tree. If there's a front here, then there's a problem with this branch right here. Even if I decide to go on this side, that branch doesn't contribute. Even if this front is over here, that branch might not contribute either, because it's on the wrong trunk. So those are things that you can do. Yeah, if we tip it, but see this branch here, that's not part of this guy. That's not part of this one. And it's leaning back this way. So if I was going to use this one at the back, then my main trunk is going to be the one at the back, not this one at the front. So this one has to go. Now this is where I'm starting to go be cutting a lot. So this is probably the last branch I'm going to cut on this tree. But so then now you can see that there could be a possible front in there with this one as a leader. This one was crossing over. Now this one here, and here's another thing too. So now I've got these two coming up here. And the reason I chose them initially was because they were kind of at least going with each other. So there might be something like this along the way where I cut this one here completely off later, and I'd have these two branches going with each other. Maybe I have an apex here and I have a branch over, I have a tree over here, right there. So it'd kind of be like what's that?
I can see that.
You can see that, right? So that's just the general idea. whether or not it happens, because this branch here probably grew at some point and I didn't catch it early on and cut it down shorter. But this one right here is like crossing. So that's no good. But I'm starting to cut a little bit more than I like right now. So I'm not going to cut that one yet. But there's movement this way, and there's movement with this one. That one right there that goes with it as well. Yeah, there's a bunch of conflicting stuff here, but there's an apex, a possible apex there, and a possible apex here. And at least that movement goes with itself. It gets a little ugly over here because the split, but I think tilting it enough is not too bad. And with this being gone later on, this section here, this one, then I'll clear up that space there. And then, like I said, you don't know what branches you're going to get. You might be able to cover this up with a branch here, you know, with some foliage here later on. You got buds here. You're going to get a whole bunch of buds later. And then you might be like doing this section here, and you might end up not leaving the gin sticking out, but more kind of inset. So it's all in the air still, but at least you're finding the line. And then what'll happen is I'll do something like this, and then I'll throw it into the back in the 5 gallon, let it sit. And then next spring, I'll bring it out again. I'll be like, okay, that's ready for a demo. Or, you know, it's got the branches there because it happens fast. Once the buds come out, maybe sometimes it could take 6 months, maybe like spring and fall. But then you get it and you're like, okay, that's demo ready. That's like, and people, you know, when they go on a demo, they're like, how did you do that? And really it just comes down to, yeah, these were decisions, slow decisions, year after year. And then eventually it has the pieces you need to do a nice first styling on it. But you have to practice at it so you kind of know which branches are the problem branches, the faulty branches, to lead you in that direction slowly. But you don't have to be married to it. It can be on this side. Who knows? But no matter what, this branch is bad from any direction. And those are the ones that you definitely get rid of.
Somebody asked, do you have any special aftercare when you've done work like this?
This one, since I didn't reduce that, oh my gosh, I made a mess. Since I didn't do that much, so even though it looks like I did a lot, no, it's not. Because see, all this, there's tons. So I know this tree is going to stay healthy. So no, the main aftercare for this, since I'm not putting into a pot, I'm not doing anything drastic to the roots, is that it just goes back in the can, it goes back in full sun, and it goes back to the regular care. Thing for aftercare tends to be for repot, you know, when I'm doing repotting, and then after like a styling, say a really aggressive styling in the spring, maybe, you know, I'll keep an eye on it. But for this was just pruning. This was basic pruning. A little late, but it's okay. It's probably good that I did it because I cleared out some stuff.
Any other questions, Jody?
Not right yet. They gotta type some in. I kind of like the front the other direction when you turned it.
All right. So when I'm choosing the branches, so let's say this is the example. I've got this branch and this branch, and sometimes the choice is really more of which one is worse than the other. Not necessarily which one is the best or which one is the right one. It's just which one does not and cannot contribute to a good design, regardless of the front. And it's this one. So this one's straight right there. This one's straight, and this one has movement. So somebody asked me earlier about, you know, how do we get movement on these older trees? Well, we save the ones that have movement. That can be one reason why you would save one branch over another, is it has movement. So this one has movement. It would lead up here, lead up here, lead up here, and this one doesn't. This one just goes straight, and you can see the right angle right there.
What are the top 3 to 5 things you look for when you're making decisions for the tree you want 5 years in the future?
Okay, let's say 3. It's movement. So if we're looking at older material, we want to find the best movement or the best character in the tree. And typically that's going to be the movement, because that's the stuff that maybe you can't, because making fine movement, like in a tree, you know, nature's go do these really incremental turns. And those things are really hard to fake with wire. Nature always does a better job of it. So that's one, is movement. Number 2 is I get rid of all the faulty branches. If I've got pocket branches, those are gone. Pocket branches are gone. I'd say if any of them, it's the pocket branches, those are gone for sure. And then the third one,
The down size.
the root
Any branches growing.
Oh, branches going down? No, not necessarily. Branches going down because it might not necessarily. If you have a semi-cascade or a cascade that you have in mind, those down ones might be good. But if you don't see it in there, then yeah, the down ones could go. But the pocket branches to me are more important to get rid of, and the reason is because those are the ones interrupting the movement. So when you have the branches in the right spots, growing in the right spots that agree with the movement of the tree, it accentuates the movement even more. It just calls out all the movement. But when you have branches that just interrupt it, that's going to be those ones that come off at the line right there, the ones that come off in the pocket. Those ones are going to just mess up your movement completely. So you want to get rid of those right away so you get the branches that show off that even more. So that kind of goes back to movement. And then the third thing is I always look for at least, I try to find a main trunk. A lot of times with raw material, you're going to have multiple trunks, multiple apexes. So you got to identify at least one focal point. If you're not sure of it, save 2, but don't save like 5 of them unless you have a whole deadwood thing going on. But deadwood only works on the base if you also ramify it too. So don't just have these weird, single kind of long trunks that are multiple apexes that don't have any ramification on it. So that's kind of 3, but it really just narrows down to movement because that's where all the character is. And then when you kill off branches, it's going to die off in those sharis, and that's going to accentuate that movement even more.
Okay. I had a question. Is there anything other than practice that can help build confidence in styling? How many trees did you style before you felt confident in your choices?
Oh, that's a hard one. So I think the only way is to practice, and you have to be willing to make a mistake, and then it's interesting because a lot of trees that I've made mistakes on, I've set them aside, and interesting things have happened. So that's what's cool about bonsai is that the mistake, if you think it's a mistake, it might not be. It grows back, and then you go have another choice to make later. But how many trees have I done? I don't know how many trees I've done at this point, but I mean, there's weeks that I've just styled tree after tree after tree, and then I'll go through a spell where I'm like, I don't want to touch a tree for a little bit, and then I've gotten to the point even where I start drawing trees. So if I'm not sure what I like, say on this one, I draw those 2 trunks and see which one I like better. So if you're not sure, I guess this could help. If you're not exactly sure and you don't want to do cuts, you can also try to just draw it out. Now, you don't have to be a fantastic artist. You just have to be able to draw lines that have movement in it. And then you can start to see, okay, if I kept that branch, and then you just, like an iPad is great, or your like phone, just use your eraser tool, and then so draw your trunk lines and then erase it. And then see if that looks good. Because when you're repairing material, it's just about the lines. It's not about all of the branches everywhere. That's all go grow in later. That's the stuff you see at the demo that has all the branches, everything. Everything's grown out. It's ready to style. But when you're doing the repair, it's really about those lines and that movement. So if you don't have access to a lot of material and you just have one tree, draw it out and see what happens when you start to erase stuff. And I think that's a pretty good one to do.
Right.
But confidence wise, it's a lot of trees. I think I've done a lot of trees. I've lost count. I've done a lot of trees. And I don't, like I said, the pocket branches, they got to go.
Another question is, you've somewhat answered this before. What is the soil you use for these trees and why?
So the soil at the nursery, the nursery stock, it works fine. See, this is just nursery. This is just nursery soil. When it gets to styling finally, and it gets transplanted, then I start putting some good aggregate on the bottom and mixing in some and loosening up the sod, loosening up the roots a little bit, maybe cutting a little bit. When it gets into a pot, that's when I put it into the pure bonsai soil mix that has really high drainage. And that's because it's going in a small pot. And that's when you're kind of getting to the point, because the pot is the frame on the picture. That's refinement stage. It's all about the health of the tree and the health of the roots.
Can you hear me, Dodie?
Yes.
Okay, so soil is expensive, and particularly if you're just getting started. So what would you suggest if somebody was buying, half a dozen 1-gallon things to kind of get started with? what would be a good mix for them to start with? Something that was inexpensive that would get them going. You like
Cactus mix. Cactus mix. It has some aggregate in there. I think if one of the cheapest things is pumice. If you can get pumice, pumice is always a winner. Mix that in there with, even if you mix it in with some cheap potting soil mix, just get some pumice in there. Get something that has the aggregate in there. That's the most important thing. So
drainage,
for drainage, yeah. And then for water retention, I mean, for you also got to keep in mind the species of the tree. So you start talking about pH and get complicated like that. And I don't want to get into that too much right now. But then you can start thinking about, okay, do you want more peat? Do you want more bark in there, for certain trees? Or am I really just concerned about drainage? So, and when it comes down to species, then you're going to have to think about pH and what soil components will lower the pH. But if you just kind of want to keep it general and you want something cheap, try to get pumice, try to get lava. You can mix that in with anything. I mean, trees grow in anything. They really grow in anything as long as you're keeping up on watering and you're doing everything else. They're growing everything as long as you're keeping it, all the other factors intact. But I think pumice is one of the cheapest things you can get.
So for local people around here, Whittier Fertilizer has that stuff. There's also a place here in Chino.
Yeah,
Sells a lot of pumice.
Yeah.
Sell pumice.
Yeah, I think farm stores, farm supply stores are good ones. So some people use perlite too. I think perlite's a little too dusty. It's and dusty. And inhaling that stuff is awful. So I stay away from perlite unless I'm propagating. But I think pumice is great. Lava is great. You can use just if you just go to the store and you look for stuff that has some aggregate ability, like the ability to just let it drain thoroughly, you can still combine it with some basic potting and peat moss. So,
and I know from experience, my own personal experience, that to go out and buy a bunch of 1 gallon nursery stock that you haven't invested a lot of money in, and just get some inexpensive soil and just have fun.
Yeah, you can. I mean, what they have in the mix, the 1 gallons, you can mix that with the other stuff.
Right.
So that way you're just improving it a little bit. But I don't think you need to get too focused in on soil unless you're really working with something where pH becomes a big deal. And azaleas are going to not a juniper. That's why with something like this, San Jose, yeah, look at this. And it's growing like crazy. But also because it's really low water there, you can see it, and it's draining through. If something goes wrong, if we're going through the nursery and we see something wrong with the tree, we're pulling that aside. Because if it's pests, I gotta make sure it doesn't spread to the other trees. And if it's alone, then I'm gonna pull it out and be like, what's going on here? If it's all muddy down here, I'm like, okay, that's the reason. Yeah. Then you can put some rocks in there, whatever you want to do. Yeah. Any other questions, Dodie?
I don't have any. I think I don't know if we're getting close to wrapping it up or not.
I think I went over most of the stuff. I think I gave a lot of information. A lot of it's probably going to be difficult for some people starting out to actually try to do it, because it does feel kind of bad when you do it. It's kind of drastic when you make cuts and your tree looks awful. And that's you'll get used to it. Once you see the results, then you'll skip to it. Like you'll do it so quick that you won't even think about it anymore.
Makes sense. We got a thank you from Janice and Bob.
Oh.
And
thanks, Janice.
Nick is excited to go kill some branches.
I know it's killing it. I guess it is killing it.
How about create deadwood? Maybe that's a better way.
Yeah, creating deadwood. Kind of naturally, I should say. It's not forced.
One person asked, could you cover the branch with foil?
With foil?
To keep sunlight off of it.
Oh, yeah, I guess you could. I mean, if you cover it at that point, though, just shave the thing off. Just gin the thing. You'll get the same thing. But foil will definitely reflect the sunlight. No, it'll die off.
Well, Jason, I sure appreciate your time and your education that you've given us. They've gotten great advice. And they said thank you. And lots of thank yous coming in.
I see them. You're welcome.
Appreciate you doing that. And it's been good education for us. Lots of thanks yous here.
Great.